I'm Monique, 72. 6 months ago, I stood on the precipice of losing everything: my home, my dignity, and my sense of self. But today, I stand on the deck of my oceanfront cottage, watching the sunrise over the Pacific, a free woman. It's a far cry from the despair I felt when my son, Ethan, and his wife, Vivienne, tried to push me out of my own life. It all started with a dinner that felt like the end of the world. It had been exactly 1 week since I buried my husband, Henry, after 35 years of marriage. The dining room, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt like a cold, empty cave. Ethan, 45, sat between Vivienne and me, his eyes fixed on his plate, avoiding my gaze. Vivienne, on the other hand, had no such qualms. Her voice, sharp as a blade, cut through the silence. Now that Henry is gone, it's time for you to move on. This house is too much for you to handle alone. We've found a nice senior community where you'll be more comfortable. I stared at her, stunned. This was the same woman who had always made me feel like an outsider in my own son's life. She'd convinced Ethan that family traditions were a burden and that spending time with me was a waste. And now, she was trying to take away my home, the place where Henry and I had built our lives. Ethan nodded, his face pale.
Mom, she's right.
It's for the best. I felt my world shatter. How could my own son turn his back on me like this? I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. The pain was too much to bear. I left the table without a word and went upstairs to my bedroom. The room still smelled like Henry, his cologne lingering in the air. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking, and stared at my reflection in the dresser mirror. The woman looking back at me was a stranger, her eyes dull with grief and shock. But as I sat there in the darkness, something inside me began to stir. Henry had always been the one to handle our finances, but he taught me to be strong and independent. He'd always said that I was capable of anything I set my mind to, and I knew that I couldn't let Ethan and Vivienne get away with this. The next day, I went to the bank. The manager, Mrs. Thompson, greeted me with a sympathetic smile. She knew about Henry's passing and had always been kind to me. I explained that I needed to understand our financial situation, that Henry had handled everything, and I was lost. Mrs. Thompson's eyes widened as she pulled up our accounts. Oh, my dear. There's more here than I expected. It seems that Henry had been very careful with your finances. She showed me the statements, and my heart skipped a beat. There were several accounts in my name, accounts that I had no idea existed. Henry had been secretly protecting me, making sure that I would be taken care of even after he was gone. As I sat there looking at the numbers on the page, I realized that Henry had known what was coming. He'd seen the way Ethan and Vivienne were treating me, and he'd taken steps to protect me. He'd been a silent guardian, watching over me from the shadows. I left the bank with a newfound sense of purpose. I knew that I had to fight for what was mine, for the life that Henry and I had built together. I called the business accountant, Mr. Davis, and arranged a meeting. He'd been Henry's accountant for years, and I knew that he would be able to help me. When I met with Mr. Davis, he showed me something that I never could have imagined. Henry's construction company, which Ethan had told me was sold and barely covered its debts, was actually thriving. It had been restructured 5 years ago, and I was the primary beneficiary of the trust that owned it. I couldn't believe my ears. Ethan had lied to me, trying to steal what was rightfully mine. But I also realized that Henry had been one step ahead of him. He'd protected the company, making sure that it would continue to provide for me. As I delved deeper into the financial records, I discovered that Ethan had borrowed a substantial amount of money from the company over the years. He'd claimed that it was for business ventures, but in reality, he'd been using it to fund his own lifestyle. The outstanding balance, with accumulated interest, was over $100,000. I was furious. Ethan had not only betrayed me, but he'd also betrayed his father's trust. He'd taken advantage of Henry's kindness and generosity, and now he was trying to take away everything that Henry had worked so hard for. I decided to confront Ethan and Vivienne. I called them to the house and showed them the evidence. Their faces paled as they realized that they'd been caught. Ethan tried to make excuses, but I wasn't listening. I told them that I was the owner of the construction company and that I would not tolerate their lies and deception. Vivienne, in a last-ditch effort to save face, tried to convince me that the house was still theirs. But I had a surprise for her. I showed her the mortgage documents. Henry had taken out a home equity loan 18 months ago, using the proceeds to invest in the construction company. The house was now collateral for the loan, and I was the one who held the keys. The look on their faces was priceless. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. They'd thought that they had everything under control, that they could just push me out of the way and take what they wanted. But they'd underestimated me. I told them that they had two choices. They could either pay back the debt to the company or move out of the house. They stared at me, stunned, unable to believe that I was standing up to them. In the end, they chose to pay back the debt. They knew that they had no other choice. They signed the settlement agreement, agreeing to a payment plan that would take them 8 years to complete. And I finally had the justice that I'd been seeking. 6 months have passed since that day, and my life has changed completely. I've moved into my oceanfront cottage, a place where I can finally be at peace. The construction company continues to thrive under the management of Tom, Henry's trusted foreman. He calls me every Friday to update me on the projects, and I feel a sense of pride knowing that Henry's legacy lives on. Ethan and Vivienne have also changed. They've started marriage counseling, and Ethan has taken on a second job to pay off his debt. He sent me a letter, apologizing for his actions and asking for my forgiveness. I haven't responded yet. I need more time to heal, to process what has happened. But I know that I will never forget what Henry did for me. He loved me enough to protect me, even from our own son. He gave me the gift of freedom, the freedom to live my life on my own terms. And I will always be grateful for that. Now, as I sit here on my deck, watching the waves crash against the shore, I feel a sense of peace. I've learned that sometimes the people we love the most can hurt us the deepest. But I've also learned that we have the power to stand up for ourselves, to fight for what is right. And I will never let anyone take away my dignity again. So, to all of you who are listening to my story, I want to ask you this. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? I'd love to hear your stories, to know that I'm not alone. Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. And remember, no matter how dark things may seem, there is always hope.